Baseball season is upon us, and that also means that it is MLB The Show franchise season. If you missed my team reveal video about 2 weeks ago that I posted, this year's team is the San Francisco Giants, as you can also tell by the thumbnail. If you missed that video, there will be a card on the screen that you can click on if you want to go see that. I would recommend it. It's got a pretty lighthearted, fun feel to it. And that lighthearted, fun feel to it is more of the style that I guess you could say I'm going to be doing for this year's franchise. Previously, with my franchises, I took them super seriously, and I would just obsess over every little detail. Is this thing realistic? Is this realistic? Is this trade going to be too out there to be realistic? Is starting this guy now realistic? It's just everything, meticulously looking at everything like that, and it's draining. To put it simply, it is very, very draining to just constantly think like that, and we're not doing that this year. I'm obviously still going to have a focus on team building. I'm not going to go full unrealistic and just trade everybody for Mike Trout or something like that. We're still going to have some realism to it. We're still going to do stuff that makes sense. Still team building, still all that stuff, still the highlights, still all the stuff that people like watching on my franchise videos. But we're going to have a little bit of different formats you'll see as the series goes on, because even I'm not sure exactly how this is going to work, but it's going to be a fun year, so let's strap in and do the team introductions. So first things first, why did I pick the San Francisco Giants? 3 reasons, essentially. 1, the team is in a rough state. I like doing rebuilding teams. 2, there are a lot of bad contracts on this team. That makes it interesting. It makes it more difficult to rebuild the team, rather than if this was like the Padres, for example, where you already pretty much have all your pieces in place, and it's just a matter of waiting for them to develop, sort of like it was with the Braves franchise that I did. This team, not like that. They have a lot of bad contracts, and they have really no young talent whatsoever. So I need to pick up prospects, and I need to figure out how to get rid of these bad contracts. But we will get more into that later on in the episode. Now we're going to go over the lineups, the rotation, and the bullpen. So the lineups versus the right-handed starting pitchers is going to be second baseman Joe Panik, catching Buster Posey, first base Brandon Belt, third base Evan Longoria, right field Gerardo Parra, shortstop Brandon Crawford, center field Kevin Pillar, and then left field Steven Duggar. Duggar is a guy who I do want to get a decent amount of at-bats. A lot of at-bats, really, because he is an potential outfielder. He's a guy who I would hope is going to be my long-term center fielder. Right now I have Pillar in center because he's the better fielder right now, but our outfield is so bad that, I'm not going to have any problems getting Steven Duggar in the lineup consistently. And then moving on to the lineup against left-handed pitching, we have leading off right fielder Gerardo Parra, catching Posey, third base Longoria, first base Tyler Austin, who was just recently picked up in real life with a trade with the Twins, left field Brandon Belt, center field Kevin Pillar, second base Joe Panik, and shortstop Brandon Crawford. Tyler Austin's bat is just too damn good against left-handed pitching to not have in the lineup. And he's playing first base while Brandon Belt is playing left field because they're both sort of first baseman, corner outfielder guys. They're going to be mixing it up throughout the season. Austin's not going to play every game at first, and Belt's not going to play every game in left. There'll be some games where Austin's in left and Belt's at first. And then taking a look at our main bench pieces, we have the first bat off our bench being Pablo Sandoval, and that's really all he is. He's the first bat of our bench against right-handed pitching because he's a switch hitter, and he's a complete liability against left-handed pitching, so he can only hit against righties. Eric Kratz is currently our backup catcher. He's good defensively, pretty much can't hit. That's basically what every catcher in modern-day baseball is. And then Yangervis Solarte is our utility guy on the bench. He's going to play pretty much everywhere. He can play all the outfield. He can play second. He can play short. He can play third. I'm sure he could play first if we really wanted him to. If you've watched my channel for a decent amount of time, you'll remember back in my Oakland Athletics franchise in MLB 16, Yangervis Solarte was one of the best players in that series, so he is back in another series of mine. And now taking a look at the rotation, we've got left-hander Bumgarner, right-hander Derek Rodriguez, left-hander Drew Pomeranz, right-hander Jeff Samardzija, and left-hander Derek Holland. And in the bullpen, it's left-hander Travis Bergen, right-hander Trevor Gott, left-hander Tony Watson, and then a bunch of righties, Nick Vincent, Sam Dyson, the guy who gave up the home run to Jose Bautista when he threw his bat to China, Mark Melancon, Reyes Maranta, and then the lefty Will Smith. Now we're just going to quickly go through some things, mainly just some depth pieces we have in our organization, guys who could be called up and down throughout the year in 2019. Not going to spend too much time on this, but before we do that, we do need to go over Johnny Cueto. As I'm sure you noticed, he was not listed in our rotation or bullpen, and that is because Johnny Cueto got Tommy John surgery in August of 2018. So he is out for pretty much the entire season. MLB.com says that he could possibly be back in 2019, so I might bring him up for like September call-ups, just get him some innings during there just to see. Or I might just have him miss the entire year. We'll decide once September rolls around, but obviously that's multiple months away. Now, on to the depth pieces. Andrew Suarez, he's a finesse lefty starter. He started 29 games in 2018 for the Giants. He'd be the first call-up if there was ever an injury or we needed a starter on the Major League team. Ty Blatch, a left-handed sinker baller. Nothing more than that. He deuces ground balls. He's more of a multiple innings reliever type guy for me than he is a starter, but he could get a spot start here and there if we ever needed him to. Brandon Beachy, a 32-year-old starting pitcher. He has not pitched in the major league since 2015 with the LA Dodgers, and then he really hasn't pitched well in the major leagues since 2012 with the Atlanta Braves. He's been hurt a lot in his career, but he's still got decent enough ratings to where he could possibly play a role on the 2019 San Francisco Giants Major League roster. Fernando Abad, left-handed reliever. He's got lots of break on his pitches. He did not pitch in the major leagues in 2018, and for some reason he has 2 more years on his contract. What is up with that? Ray Black is an interesting relief option for us that we have in AAA. He throws absolute gas. The guy can easily crank it to 100 miles an hour, but he has struggled in his career with control. His walk per 9 rating and his control rating reflect that. He's not the greatest overall player, but he could be an interesting guy that gets called up, especially once we do make a ton of trades with our bullpen pieces, like I mentioned earlier. Pat Vendette, I don't know exactly how to say that. I'll figure it out as the series goes on. He's an ambidextrous pitcher. I mean, what else is there to say? Now on to some of the position players. We have catcher Stephen Vogt in AAA. He's catcher depth. He can also play first base and corner outfielder. He's a decent bat against right-handed pitching, but he's completely useless against lefties. He also hasn't played in the majors since 2017. Aramis Garcia, also some catcher depth. He's great defensively, can't hit. Basically like every other catcher. Donovan Solano. He is the only guy in the entire organization, aside from Brandon Crawford, who is good enough defensively to play shortstop at the major league level. Breivik Valera, he's a utility infielder, switch hitter, got some decent contact, could see him up making some appearances at the major league level. Mac Williamson is an outfield prospect that did not pan out for the Giants. He's now 28 years old. He can't hit, he's pretty good in the field, and he's got decent speed. Michael Reed, another guy, he's basically a Mac Williamson clone who's 2 years younger. And because our organizational depth is so weak, I went out and made a couple minor league signings, guys who could possibly, make their way onto a team. Maybe not, maybe they will, maybe you've heard of these guys, maybe you haven't. First one, Adam Brett Walker, a power-hitting corner outfielder. He's 26 years old. He's assigned to AAA. He's got some pop in his bat. He could possibly hit a few home runs here and there. Not really a long-term guy to look at, but he's on the team, in the organization, I should say, nonetheless. Victor Roach, basically the same deal as Brett Walker, but a little bit different. He's 26 years old, corner outfielder. He was assigned to AAA for us. He can crank a decent amount of home runs, and he can also walk a decent amount. He's pretty much like a poor man's Joey Gallo type bat, except more of like an extremely poor man's Joey Gallo. And then the most well-known out of the free agents that I went out and picked up was second baseman / third baseman Ryan Schimpf. He was also assigned to AAA. He has a ton of pop in his bat. He can hit a lot of home runs if he plays every day, and he's also going to walk a ton. I would say he is extremely likely to be on the big league roster at some point this year. It's just a matter of if Joe Panik plays well, or if Pablo Sandoval is good enough as the first bat off the bench, because this is the National League. You do need a guy who comes off the bench and hits well for you as a bench piece. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of bad contracts on this team. That's one of the reasons why I picked this team as my franchise team this year, because it makes it more difficult to rebuild a roster, rebuild the team in this game. So Johnny Cueto is the first one up. He's going to miss 2019, like I said, but he is signed through 2021, and he's making $21.7 million a year. Not really a tradable contract. He's still got decent enough ratings to where he could be serviceable when he comes back next year, but not really a tradable contract, especially at that much money. He's not like the Johnny Cueto that they signed. But I mean, hey, possibly he could be traded in the final year of that deal. We'll see what happens once that rolls around. Madison Bumgarner, our current ace. Everybody knows about Bumgarner. He's in the last year of his contract, and I would say there's a 99.9% chance that he gets traded at the deadline this year. Buster Posey is a guy making a little over $20 million a year through 2021. He is still very good, though. He's obviously insanely good behind the plate. He could play some first base as well once he gets later in his career. If he doesn't retire at the end of his contract, I would probably bring him back anyways, because Posey is a guy who I feel like should retire as a San Francisco Giant. I don't want to mess that up in this. The only way I wouldn't bring him back at the end of his contract is if he was like, hey, I'm 36 years old, please give me $25 million a year. That's the only way I would be like, yeah, no, you're gonna finish your career somewhere else. Brandon Belt is another guy who is making $14.6 million per year through 2021. You'll notice that's a common theme with these contracts, 2021. I don't think he'll be traded in 2019 this season, but he is still a good enough player. He can be a really good bat in a lineup. He could definitely get some interest from other teams, so I could definitely see me trading him in the future. Brandon Crawford, the shortstop with the long hair, which is somehow always wet. He is making $12.5 million per year, you guessed it, through 2021. He's a guy who I don't know if he'll be traded by us, but I mean, he's currently 32, I think, so he's signed through 2021. I don't think a 35-year-old shortstop in 2022 is really in my plans for this team, so even though I think a lot of Giants fans think that Brandon Crawford should be a lifelong Giant, he's probably not going to be a lifelong Giant in this universe. Now here's where things really get complicated. Evan Longoria, third baseman, this is the contract that is a major pain in the ass to have on the team. He's making a lot of money. He is still on that insanely long contract that he signed with the Tampa Bay Rays. Longoria is signed through 2022, not through 2021, 2022. So he's going to be around for a while, but the thing with him is he's already 33. He'll be 36 in the last year of his deal. He'll be 37 when it's over. Like I said, he's already declining, and I guess you can't say the contract is untradeable. I'm doing air quotes right now because he's already been traded by the Rays to the Giants, but I mean, it's probably going to be difficult to find another team that's going to take him. I'd say at worst for Longoria, his future is being a very expensive bench piece, you know, like a guy who comes off the bench, hits for us in pinch hit situations, maybe a platoon at third base. Obviously, right now, he is the clear-cut best option we have at third base, but I mean, who knows? Maybe we pick up a third base prospect since we have absolutely none of those, and I want him to play at third base more than Longoria. I would have no problem benching Longoria for him. Now that the bad contracts are out of the way, we've got to take a look at Gerardo Parra, our current right fielder. He is up at the end of the year, and he could easily be flipped for a decent prospect or two at the deadline, especially if he has a good year. Even if he has a decent year, he'll probably still be flipped for a couple prospects, or maybe just one prospect, depending on what we can get for him. And then the other tradable contracts on this team are essentially the entire bullpen. The bullpen is extremely interesting because they have a lot of guys who just could possibly be very good or possibly be completely not good. But I would say that everybody in the bullpen except for Will Smith, Reyes Maranta, and maybe Mark Melancon is tradable. So Trevor Gott, Sam Dyson, all those guys, they're all tradable. If those guys have good years, they'll easily be flipped for some good prospects, or at least decent prospects, and get some position players and just some organizational depth for the young guys in this organization, because right now, we have absolutely none of that. We've got maybe like 3 people who could possibly be somewhere in this organization or somewhere in the Major League roster in the future. Aside from that, there's nothing. There's just a bunch of absolute garbage up and down this system. But hey, that's why you pick this team. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be fun. The series this year itself is going to be fun. And that's going to wrap things up here for this episode of the San Francisco Giants franchise, the team introduction episode. Next up, you will see opening day. And with that being said, I've been your host, Jerseyborn, and I am saying, Squirtle is the best starter Pokemon.